Have you ever found yourself standing in the silence of prayer, wondering why heaven seems so far away? You kneel. You whisper. You wait. But all you hear is nothing. There are moments in every soul's journey when God withdraws his voice, not in cruelty but in love. Moments when the warmth of faith turns cold, when light fades into shadow and you begin to ask, have I done something wrong? Has God forgotten me? Saint Teresa of Ávila knew this silence well. She called it the beginning of the divine purification, the sacred work that transforms an ordinary believer into a soul of fire. In her own words, the Lord leads the soul through deserts, that it may thirst for the waters of life. The saints were not spared from pain. They were invited into it. And it was within those very trials, tears, confusion, and longing, that they found the door to union with God. Tonight, you will walk beside Saint Teresa through 7 mystical trials that every soul must endure on its journey toward divine intimacy. These are not punishments. They are invitations. Each one a secret message from heaven. I am purifying you because I love you. If you have ever felt abandoned, misunderstood, or spiritually lost, this message is for you. For Teresa teaches that when the soul feels furthest from God, it is often closest to his transforming touch. So take a deep breath. Set aside your fears. The path you are walking is not a mistake. It is a sacred design. And through the wisdom of Saint Teresa of Ávila, you will come to see that every dark night hides a hidden sunrise. And that the hand of God, though unseen, never stops guiding the soul that dares to trust him. There comes a time when prayer feels like speaking into an empty room. You whisper your needs, your gratitude, your fears, and all that answers is silence. It is here that many souls turn away. They believe God has left them. But Saint Teresa teaches the opposite. She wrote, when God seems farthest from the soul, he is drawing it into his deepest friendship. This silence is not absence. It is invitation. It is the language of a God who longs to teach you how to love without reward. In her interior castle, Teresa describes the early mansions of the soul, those first steps of prayer where we still crave emotion, consolation, and clear signs of divine presence. When these disappear, we panic. But Teresa explains that this is precisely how God begins to purify love itself. He removes the sweetness of prayer so that we might love him for who he is, not for how he makes us feel. He hides so that we may learn to seek. He grows silent so that we may listen for his voice in deeper ways. Not in words, but in surrender. Perhaps you know this trial right now. You pray and the heavens do not move. You go to Mass and your heart feels heavy, unresponsive. Even Scripture seems lifeless. Do not fear this dryness. Saint Teresa assures us that the soul in such darkness is being drawn into the very mystery of Christ's abandonment on the cross. There too God was silent. There too love was tested. Teresa once confessed that during her years of spiritual dryness, she often said to the Lord, "Even if you kill me, I will still trust you." Those words became the flame that lit her transformation. She understood that silence was not rejection. It was refinement. If you find yourself in this sacred silence, stay. Do not rush to fill it with noise, distraction, or despair. Sit in it as Teresa did. Let the emptiness teach you what no voice can say. That love is strongest when it stands alone, without comfort or confirmation. This is the first mystical trial, the silence of God. It feels like distance, but it is actually the beginning of intimacy. And those who persevere through it will find that beneath the silence lies the softest whisper of all. I am here. There is a moment in every believer's journey when faith trembles. You begin to wonder if the light you once saw so clearly was only a reflection of your own desire. You read, you pray, you question, yet the answers seem just beyond your reach. Saint Teresa knew this well. Even she, a doctor of the Church, confessed that there were times when her mind was clouded with uncertainty. She wrote, "The soul may be attacked by thoughts it does not wish to think. The devil tries to convince it that all it has believed is illusion. Doubt," she teaches, is not sin. It is a storm permitted by God to deepen our roots. When the winds of uncertainty blow, the soul must cling not to emotion but to trust. Teresa compared faith to a candle trembling in a dark corridor. The flame flickers but it does not go out. And it is in that flicker, she said, that the soul learns the humility of true belief. We stop demanding that faith feel certain. We begin to understand that real faith survives precisely because it learns to believe without proof. Perhaps you have felt this weight. You read of miracles but have never seen one. You hear others speak of divine presence, yet you feel alone. You wonder, why them and not me? Teresa would tell you, God allows this darkness so that your faith might no longer rest on emotion or understanding but on love alone. The mind must bow before the mystery it cannot grasp. And in that surrender the soul grows stronger than it ever was before. In her Way of Perfection, Teresa wrote that when the soul is tormented by uncertainty, it should whisper only one prayer. Lord, I do not understand you, but I choose you. Those words, she said, pierce the heavens like arrows of pure gold. So if you find yourself doubting today your prayers, your path, even your worth, do not run from it. Sit with it. Look at it through the eyes of Teresa, who understood that God sometimes hides his truth behind the veil of confusion, only to reveal it more clearly when the soul is ready. This second mystical trial, the weight of doubt, is not a punishment for weak faith. It is the training ground of saints. For the soul that learns to trust in darkness will one day shine brighter than all the stars that guided it. There are moments when the soul feels surrounded by shadows. When old desires return, when forgotten fears rise from the depths. When even prayer seems to awaken the very passions we thought we had conquered. Saint Teresa calls this the trial of fire. It is the time when the enemy of the soul whispers, "You have not changed. You will never be free." But Teresa, who walked through her own storms of temptation, teaches that such moments are not signs of failure. They are proof that the soul is approaching true purification. She wrote, "The closer a soul draws to God, the more fiercely the devil rages." Temptation, she explained, is not a measure of distance from grace, but of progress toward it. For the enemy does not bother with those already lost. He fights hardest against the soul that is beginning to burn with divine love. Teresa herself endured this. In her life, she confesses that she was tempted by vanity, by comfort, by pride, even by despair. She would sometimes leave prayer in tears, feeling unworthy to kneel before God. And yet, it was in those very tears that her strength was born. She discovered that the secret to victory was not to fight temptation directly, but to lift her gaze beyond it. "Let the storm rage," she said, "but keep your eyes upon Christ. The waves cannot drown a soul that clings to the cross." Temptation has a hidden purpose. It exposes what is still unhealed. It reveals the cracks in our devotion, the places where self-love hides. And by showing us our weakness, it invites us to depend completely on grace. Perhaps you know this fire. Perhaps you have prayed, "Lord, why do these thoughts return? Why do I still fall?" Teresa would tell you gently, because God is teaching you humility. The soul that has never struggled can never truly love. When temptation comes, she advises, do not argue with it. Do not analyze it. Simply whisper, "Jesus, I trust you," and walk away. Every time you resist, no matter how small the victory, your love is refined like gold in a furnace. This third mystical trial, the fire of temptation, is the forge of saints. For those who pass through it with perseverance emerge not with pride, but with compassion, able to understand the weakness of others and to love them as God has loved us. Patiently, mercifully, unconditionally. And when at last the fire subsides, the soul stands purified. Not because it never fell, but because through every fall it learned to rise again in love. There is a kind of loneliness that no human companionship can ease. It comes even to those surrounded by family, by friends, by the comfort of community. It is the loneliness of the soul that longs for God, and finds only silence in return. Saint Teresa called this the solitude of the spirit. She wrote, "There are moments when even those who love us cannot reach us. The soul stands alone before its Creator, and in that solitude, it learns who God truly is." This is not ordinary sadness. It is the deep ache of the heart that has tasted divine intimacy and now feels its apparent absence. You may find yourself wondering, why does God draw near only to withdraw again? Why awaken such longing if he means to leave me empty? Teresa answers with divine tenderness. Because love must be purified from attachment to all created things, even from the need to feel God's presence. The soul that loves only when it feels consoled still loves for itself. But the soul that continues to love when it feels abandoned, that is the soul that begins to love as God loves. In her interior castle, Teresa described how this loneliness deepens the soul's prayer. At first we speak many words. Later, when words fail, we simply remain. We sit before the tabernacle, eyes closed, whispering nothing but our existence. "I am here, Lord." And though heaven seems silent, that stillness is the holiest dialogue of all. Teresa herself endured years of this spiritual isolation. Even her closest companions could not understand the darkness that surrounded her prayer. Yet she discovered that this very solitude was God's way of shaping her into his dwelling place. The soul must be emptied of all, she wrote, so that it may be filled with the all. If you walk through this trial, do not be afraid of your aloneness. Do not rush to fill it with noise or distraction. Let it become your chapel. For in that sacred emptiness, unseen hands are building within you a sanctuary where only God can enter. The loneliness of the spirit is not a sign of abandonment. It is the mark of intimacy. For God draws the soul away from the crowd, so that he may speak to it heart to heart. And though you may not feel his nearness, he is closer than ever, whispering through the silence, "Be still, my beloved. I am making you mine." There are seasons when pain becomes a constant companion. Illness, loss, betrayal, exhaustion. The weight of human frailty presses so heavily that even breathing feels like prayer. It is in these moments that the soul cries out, "Why must love hurt so much?" Saint Teresa of Ávila did not hide from this question. She knew the language of suffering more fluently than most. Her body was fragile, her nights were restless, her heart was often pierced by the sorrows of those she guided. Yet through every cross she discovered something astonishing. That suffering, when embraced with faith, becomes the very door through which divine love enters the soul. She wrote, "When the Lord grants great sufferings, it is a sign that he desires great love." To the world this sounds like madness. But to Teresa, the cross was not a symbol of defeat. It was the throne of transformation. Pain strips away illusions. It humbles the proud heart, quiets the restless mind, and exposes what we truly love. In comfort, faith is easily spoken. In suffering, faith is proved. Teresa once said that the soul united with Christ must learn to love the cross as he did. Not because it feels good, but because it purifies love of all that is false. When she was bedridden, unable to pray as she wished, she would whisper, "Lord, if this be your will, let me suffer, so long as I do not offend you." That prayer, born in agony, was her offering of perfect love. Perhaps you too carry a cross that feels too heavy. A lingering illness, a broken relationship, a loss that will not heal. Teresa would tell you this: do not curse the pain. Look upon it through the eyes of faith. The very thing you beg God to remove may be the tool he is using to shape your soul into his image. Suffering is not punishment. It is purification. And when it is united with the sufferings of Christ, it becomes powerful beyond imagination. Every sigh, every tear, every hidden act of endurance becomes prayer. A silent hymn rising to heaven. Teresa wrote, "The Lord walks among the pots and pans." She meant that even in the smallest, most ordinary hardships, God is present. There is no pain so small that he does not use it to carve the contours of holiness into the soul. The cross of suffering, then, is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to uncover the part of you that cannot be destroyed. The part made in the image of eternal love. So when your heart aches, whisper as Teresa did, "Lord, either let me suffer or let me die of love." For in that paradox lies the deepest truth she ever discovered. That the soul which learns to suffer with Christ will one day rejoice with him in glory. Among all the trials that visit the soul, Saint Teresa considered this one the most subtle and dangerous. It does not arrive with thunder or temptation. It hides in holiness itself. It is the shadow of self-love, the quiet pride that grows when we begin to admire our own virtue. Teresa wrote, "There is no snare more cunning than to believe ourselves already good." The soul begins to mistake spiritual feelings for sanctity, discipline for perfection, success for divine favor. Without realizing it, we start to seek God's gifts more than God himself. She confessed that in her early years she too was deceived by this shadow. She took comfort in her religious devotion, in her reputation for piety, in the sweetness she sometimes felt in prayer. But then came the humbling grace of truth. Her confessor told her, "Mother Teresa, humility is to walk in truth." Those words pierced her heart. She understood then that genuine love of God must be free of all self-admiration. When the soul loves itself more than the Creator, even in small ways, it builds walls within the interior castle. The divine light cannot fully enter until those walls crumble. Perhaps you have felt this hidden pride, the satisfaction after a generous act, the quiet desire to be seen as good, the subtle resentment when others are praised. These are not mortal sins, Teresa would say, but gentle alarms from heaven, a reminder that we still have far to travel. She warned her nuns that even the desire to be holy can become an idol if it is not rooted in humility. Let us not seek to do great things, she wrote, but to do small things with great purity of intention. For the soul purified of self-love no longer measures its worth by visible results. It measures by obedience and surrender. This trial often comes when a soul has advanced in prayer. Visions, consolations, spiritual insights, they may visit and the soul may begin to believe it is chosen, special, superior. Teresa cautioned against this illusion. The devil, she said, is delighted when he sees a soul take pride in what God alone has done. He cannot steal divine grace, but he can poison it with vanity. The remedy, Teresa teaches, is radical humility. To laugh gently at oneself. To remember one's faults without despair. To give all glory to God for every good impulse and every victory. She advised her sisters, if you fall, thank God for showing you your weakness. If you rise, thank Him for lifting you. In neither case take credit for yourself. So when you feel the pull of self-admiration, when your soul delights more in being seen as holy than in simply being God's servant, remember Teresa's counsel. Let us become nothing that Christ may be all. The shadow of self-love fades only when the soul steps fully into that light. The light of humility, where every virtue shines not for our glory but for His. And when that humility finally takes root, the heart becomes transparent. Through it the divine radiance passes freely. No masks, no pretenses, only truth. This is the sixth mystical trial, to die to the love of self, so that at last the soul may live entirely in the love of God. There comes a moment when every soul that has endured the silence, the doubt, the fire, the loneliness, the suffering and the stripping of pride is brought to a single final threshold. It is here that Saint Teresa says the soul is tested not by pain but by love itself. It is the trial of surrender, the moment when we must place everything, even our holiness, into God's hands. Teresa wrote, "The Lord asks only two things of us, love of His Majesty and love of our neighbor. When these are perfect, all else is given. But to love perfectly the soul must let go of control. It must consent to be guided where it does not understand, to walk where there is no path, to trust when there is no assurance. This surrender is not weakness. It is the highest act of strength, the strength to yield completely to the will of the one who loves us beyond measure." Teresa described it as a gentle death, the dying of the self-will that once resisted divine guidance. The soul, she said, is like a drop of water falling into the ocean. It loses its name but gains the sea. Perhaps you have felt this invitation, to release your plans, your fears, your timelines. You may have prayed, "Lord, I give you everything," and then quietly tried to take it back again. We all do. Surrender is learned through many small deaths. The death of certainty, the death of control, the death of expectation. But through each letting go, the soul grows freer, lighter, more radiant with peace. Teresa taught that when the soul finally yields, it enters what she called the seventh mansion, the innermost dwelling of the heart, where the divine and human wills are joined as one. In this sacred union, prayer becomes effortless, for the soul no longer strives to reach God. It rests in Him. Desire is replaced by stillness. Fear gives way to joy. The storm that once raged is now a quiet sea reflecting the face of Christ. This is the moment when love ceases to be a feeling and becomes existence itself. Teresa described it in words both beautiful and trembling. The soul no longer lives in itself but in God. Its very breath is prayer, its silence adoration. Such surrender is the destiny of every believer. We were not created to control life but to be consumed by love. And when the soul says its final yes, without resistance, without hesitation, it discovers that the God it sought in darkness was never far away. He was waiting, patient and tender, for the day the soul would open its hands and say, "All that I am I give to you." This is the seventh and final mystical trial, the flame of surrender. It does not destroy, it transfigures. It burns away everything that is not love until only love remains. And when that moment comes, Teresa assures us, the soul becomes what it was always meant to be. A living flame of divine fire, burning not for its own glory, but for the glory of the one who loved it first. Now you have walked with Saint Teresa through the 7 mystical trials. The silence, the doubt, the fire, the loneliness, the suffering, the shadow, and finally the surrender. Each one felt at first like loss, like abandonment, like death. Yet within every trial was hidden the touch of divine mercy. Teresa wrote that the soul purified by these passages becomes like a diamond. Though the stone be rough and uncut, when the chisel strikes, it shines with the light that was always within. Every blow, every scar, every tear has been the artist's hand revealing what you truly are. A reflection of the eternal light of God. Perhaps you now see your own story within hers. The seasons when heaven was silent. The nights when prayer felt empty. The days when love demanded everything you had. They were not punishments. They were invitations. Through them, God was shaping your soul into something capable of divine friendship. Teresa's wisdom is not a distant relic of the past. It is a living map for every heart that longs for union with God. She reminds us that holiness is not perfection. It is perseverance. It is choosing to love again and again even when love costs us everything. And when the soul finally reaches that still point of surrender, it discovers what Teresa called the marriage of the Spirit. A union so deep that words cannot describe it. A peace so vast that even suffering becomes sweet. The soul, she wrote, rests in God as a child in the arms of its Father, content with whatever He wills. This is the end of the journey and the beginning of eternity. For the purified soul no longer seeks signs, consolations, or visions. It seeks only the Giver Himself. It prays not with many words, but with a quiet heart that says, I am yours. So if these teachings of Saint Teresa have touched something within you, if you have recognized your own trials in her journey, then you are already walking the same sacred road. Do not lose heart. Every darkness has purpose and every cross leads home. And as you continue your own pilgrimage of faith, remember her promise. The Lord never tires of giving. It is we who tire of receiving. Open your heart again and let Him finish what He has begun. If you wish to walk deeper into the timeless wisdom of Saint Teresa, to learn how her voice still speaks across the centuries, then I invite you gently, sincerely, subscribe to this channel, Timeless Wisdom of Saint Teresa. Here, you will find her counsel for the weary, her light for the doubting, her peace for the suffering. For her words are not echoes of the past. They are living fire. And that fire was meant for you.